All right, it is officially 3:30, so we are going to get started so we can get to all of the awesome offerings that we have for you today. Welcome to the All Learners Network Annual Conference. This is the last session of this event. We're so excited you're joining us tonight. Our keynote speaker is Erin Oliver, and her keynote address is on All Means All. I'll introduce her in just a second. We'd also like to start by thanking the Vermont Agency of Education for sponsoring this annual event. That's what allows it to be free for participants, and we're so happy you were able to join us. I want to introduce Erin Oliver. Erin is the keynote speaker for tonight. She's also one of our presenters. So Erin is our keynote speaker. She works with us at All Learners Network. She is also a math specialist in Grand Isle. She's the menu coordinator. So if you subscribe to our menus, Erin is the person who's taking charge of that. Erin's grew up in Vermont. She's from Vermont, but she started her teaching career in New Orleans with what was it, Teach for America, Erin? Or the
Yeah.
Teach. So awesome. So she's going to share a little bit about her experience as an educator in Vermont. Her keynote address is called All Means All. And if you have not yet, please drop in the chat where you are from. We'd love to know where you are joining us from today. And we're so happy you're here with us. Erin, I am going to stop sharing so that you can share your own slide deck.
Great. Okay, so this is my fourth Killington conference. We're not at Killington, I wish we were. But I actually really love this moment because it's a moment where our whole network really gets to come together. And for me, I'm constantly in awe of the depth of the resources in our network. Like, whether we're in a physical room or a virtual room, when I look around, I'm in awe of the educators that come together in this network. I think I like this moment the most because I feel surrounded by others who have hope and belief that all means all actually is possible. And that matters a lot to me. All means all. To me, it's a commitment to all learners in our community to ensure that students have an opportunity and access to be successful in math. And I choose to be a part of the All Learners Network because I believe that together we are tackling the greatest problem solver of our careers, solving for equity in education. Today, I'm asking us to kind of zoom out and think about what motivates and inspires us to be in this work together. I know that every one of us brings different personal experiences and work experiences that has committed us to this mission of all means all. Today, I'm going to share a story from the beginning years of my teaching career, because I think through storytelling of why we're in this mission together, we will actually strengthen our network. So today, this is the story that fuels my passion for our mission. Okay, so I began teaching in New Orleans, and it was just under 2 years after Katrina. So the Louisiana Department of Education was operating this major change initiative where the entire system of schools in New Orleans was about to change. And it was going to change to be better for more students. Not all, not yet, but more. And I got to spend 8 years kind of on the front lines of this system overhaul, which taught me an incredible amount about what is actually required for us to change systems in education. My first 2 years of teaching taught me a lot about systems and the fact that they matter a lot. In fact, in those first 2 years, I started to really understand that many systems that are in place in our school buildings that are intended to help students often end up widening their opportunity gaps more. My first 2 years of teaching was at a school called Wicker Elementary School. And these are the 2 years that taught me how much systems truly matter. So the the chaos in the Wicker Elementary building was palpable. When I got there for my interview, the principal met us at the front door and she said, "I'm just going to take you on a tour through the school building because if you can't handle the noise and disruptions that you're about to witness, it is literally a waste of my time to interview you." And she proceeded to walk us around the school where I discovered classrooms didn't have walls. They had shelves that were about like chest height. And there were literally moments in the tour where the noise was deafening. So we got back to the main office and 2 people actually left, like, "I'm not going to interview here." Because I had set up the interview through Teach for America, they had made it very clear that I was not allowed to leave and I had to accept a job if they offered one. So I accepted a job as a first grade teacher the following year. I got stuck in this middle classroom between Mrs. Swaney and Mrs. Bolt. And over the summer, they installed office dividers. So the students couldn't see each other anymore, but we could still all hear each other. I was a new teacher, so I had a lack of classroom systems that was disastrous. So I have this distinct memory of calling my dad one day and just sobbing on the phone because I had had 2 students kind of in cahoots with each other, and one was distracting me by running around the classroom with a chair over her head, while the other one kind of like snuck over to my desk, grabbed my water bottle and squirted me in the back with it. So like the shock on my face was hysterical, which caused the rest of my class to just burst out laughing. And because we were in a space with shared class, like essentially a shared classroom space, the other 2 classrooms of 25 first graders each also started laughing. So I essentially had 75 first graders just like laughing at my expense, which I describe as my teacher rock bottom. So eventually Mrs. Swaney and Mrs. Bolt took pity on me. They had to because the noise of my classroom was disrupting their classroom. And they taught me systems that I could put in place that would help 24 6-year-olds who were struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder to be calm and relaxed and able to focus on the work and the thinking that we were doing. I still had a ton of bad days my first year. Like we faced many more bad days, but the more I used Mrs. Swaney and Mrs. Bolt's systems, the stronger our classroom got together and the calmer our days became. So in my second year working at Wicker, my principal made a tragic choice, a tragic change to our systems of student support. So she said, we need to give more students access to a better learning environment, which like everyone agreed, right? We do have to do that. But then her solution was to take each of our testing grades and look at their Louisiana state test, the score on their Louisiana state test, their ELA test, and sort our grade levels, 3rd through 8th grade, into 3 different classrooms, a low, middle, and high classroom based on their state test scores from the year before. They were going to stay fixed in these groups for the whole year. Like these weren't temporary or a part of their day. It was the whole day. And we never switched groupings, even for their math classroom, even though these groupings were based on an ELA score. Essentially, we had tracked our entire 3rd through 8th grade student body based on one performance indicator that was taken on one day in their lives, a few years from the most traumatic event of their lives. So there's literally nothing about that that's okay. So I hate, like, this is the part of the story that's really challenging for me to tell, because I feel like I have to face my own personal failures. I hate that I complied, that I just watched the classroom rosters be formed this way and I didn't say anything. And so I was a second year teacher, like maybe it wasn't my place to say something, but nobody said anything. Like we all just went with her solution. And I honestly, I'm not sure why we let that happen. Like why someone didn't say, yo, this is not right for all of our students. I wonder if All Learners Network had been in my life then, if I would have known to fight. But instead, I was assigned to teach our third grade low class. So I found myself standing in front of 25 third graders who were reading on average at a level A, and many didn't know their letters and sounds. I was armed with Mrs. Swaney and Mrs. Bolt's classroom systems, and I was given an intervention curriculum that was intended to be our main curriculum for the year. Again, there's nothing about that that's okay. And I don't have any memory of a special education teacher helping me at all in this time period, and I am positive that many of those students needed much more specialized instruction than I knew how to do at that point. So for those of you who have heard my pool analogy in a math menu workshop, I ask us to consider the real life decisions in school buildings that leave students in the locker room. And when I tell this analogy, my third grade class of Wicker students is the locker room that I'm imagining. And when I name participants in the workshop to say, you have to stay behind, you have to stay behind, you have to stay behind, I'm actually picturing some of those Wicker third graders. So it was not very long into the school year that it was like super obvious that we were drowning. I didn't have enough tools in my teacher toolbox to deal with the needs that were in front of me. And frustrations from students were explosive for many, many reasons, my lack of skills, their mental health needs. So security guards were in my classroom almost daily. That only helped kind of remind me of the real life presence of a school to prison pipeline. On top of that, Louisiana at the time predicts prison numbers future prison numbers based off of third grade state test scores. And that was like killing me every single day. And I was literally trying everything that I could think of, but we were combusting more and more every day. So a third of the way into the school year, my principal calls me into her office and she says, "You're struggling in your classroom." True. There's been 3 fights there this week. True. And you have students hiding in a closet, which was also true. I had these 2 identical twin boys that had just taken to like locking themselves in this closet, and it was nearly impossible to get them out every day. So she said, I'm moving you. You're not gonna teach this class anymore. You're gonna teach our 4th grade ELA class, because that 4th grade teacher has quit. She's not in the building anymore. And she's such a seasoned veteran that she's accrued so much leave time. I don't have the money to pay for a new teacher. So that next Monday, I became our 4th grade ELA teacher, because our principal, when faced with the impossible decision of which classroom gets the long-term sub for the rest of the year, she went by her most immediate concern, which was the 4th grade Louisiana state test. Because at that time, the 4th grade Louisiana state test was called a high stakes testing year, because if you failed the test, you had to repeat your 4th grade year, which is just another example of a system designed, I think it was designed to help students, but it mostly only prevented students from getting all the way to 8th grade, high school. It had a seriously negative consequence. So my 3rd grade class faced a series of long-term subs. Few stayed for months, some stayed for weeks, one quit within 2 days. And I think that we all in this room know that when my 3rd graders took on the 4th grade high stakes test the next year, they got caught in the retention trap. There's no way they didn't, which only further reduces the likelihood that any of my Wicker 3rd graders made it to their high school graduation. Which is a real life example of the winnowing effect that Bob Laird talked about in his keynote last year that happens inside of school buildings. This is an extreme example. So thinking of my Wicker 3rd graders who got abandoned inside of a system that was supposed to help them, that fuels my mission. That fuels my passion for our mission. So it's no surprise that this is the end of my Wicker story, because at the end of that year, Wicker Elementary had not made the satisfactory growth that we were required to make by the Recovery School District, which was the district we are a part of. So Wicker Elementary got taken over by a charter school because the Louisiana Department of Education at that time was trying everything they could to change failing schools into public charter schools. And what this was going to do was open up choice and access for all families in New Orleans. So all of a sudden, it didn't matter where you lived in New Orleans, you could pick any school to go to. And if you were a failing school like Wicker, you weren't allowed to exist anymore. You got taken over by a charter school prepared to try to make the growth that was possible with our students. It would be like taking Chittenden County in Vermont and saying, it doesn't matter where you live, you can go to any of our schools. It truly a revolutionary idea. So families in New Orleans could now pick any school to go to, and the charter schools that were arising were competing with each other for student enrollment. So there was a lot of new good practices that got put in place. So to end my Wicker story, we got taken over by a charter school called Success Preparatory Academy. And all of our kindergarten through 2nd grade students at Wicker were given the choice to stay at Success Prep and grow and learn with this new charter school. And my 3rd graders didn't make the cut because the new principals didn't want to start with a high stakes testing year. They didn't want to start with 4th grade. So I don't know what happened to them, or I just know that they went to another school in the RSD. And I have very little hope that any of their educational careers ended positively. Teachers were also given the choice to stay. You had to interview with the charter school if you wanted to stay, or you could be reassigned to a school in the RSD. And so I was one of 2 teachers that chose to stay and interview with the charter school. From there, we went from a failing school to a top growth school in New Orleans in just a few years. And what I saw happen at Success Prep convinced me even more that systems matter so much. And I think the positive out of this story is that in times of chaos, when things are not the way they should be, that's actually when we can improve systems the most. So the next 6 years I spent working and learning at Success Preparatory Academy. I was a head kindergarten teacher for a while, where We took on 33 kindergarten students and a new first-year teacher. And I taught both the first-year teacher and the 33 kindergarten students how to be in a school building for the first time in their lives. And that was lots more lessons and chaos. And then I took on coordinating our whole school's intervention program and was our school-wide intervention coordinator. And finally, I ended my time there as our elementary academy director. So I was in charge of 12 classrooms and 15 teachers. And it was at my time at Success Prep that I learned, in order to implement change, like real change that stays, you have to address mindsets and beliefs. They can't be ignored. So when someone asks me, what was the biggest change from Wicker to Success? I say two things: the adults and the expectations of students. So first of all, the adults changed drastically. We had a 4-part interview process that you had to go through, and it was rigorous. By the end of the interview process, you felt like you had already worked for the mission, like you were already on board with the school. And those who weren't invested in the mission of this school, they dropped out of the interview process before the end because they were like, this is too much work. So at the end, our principal had designed this interview process that instilled a staff culture that was going to work tirelessly behind our mission. And our mission was to develop college-bound students for leadership and lifelong learning. At Wicker, every teacher's motivation was different. Some were there to really help students. Some were there for a paycheck. But at Success Prep, everyone was there for the same reason. This meant that we worked harder, collaborated more, problem solved more, failed and tried new ideas over and over and over again because we were willing to work for the mission. Our principal asked us to embody the mission in our own practices. So if we were asking our students to be lifelong learners, he asked us to be lifelong learners as well. So we had daily observations with feedback. We had every 6 weeks an entire day to look at data and examine our own practices. We were constantly talking about how do we reach more of our learners. And because we were united in this mission, we started to model a learning culture that we wanted from our students as well. I feel super lucky that I went from my experience at Wicker to this extreme contrast. And not all of us have leaders that can do that, just get everyone on the mission all together. Most of us don't even have mission statements to believe in. We have 3-page documents that outline our school's improvement plan. This is why I know being part of the All Learners Network is so, so valuable. We are creating what happened at Success Prep among my staff, like a learning culture that is tirelessly working towards our mission of all means all. And we welcome a deep network of problem solvers to take this on together. And to me, this is why All Learners Network means so much to me. The other major change was that the expectations of students changed. And this is what I think is so powerful. It was almost entirely, a few new students came, our kindergartners were new, right? But almost entirely, this was the same students who had been in Wicker the year before. But there was now a big difference. Every adult in the building now believed that they were on a pathway to college. At Wicker, there were many adults who believed that no student in our building would ever care about their learning, and there were several that didn't believe our students were capable of learning. Adult mindsets and beliefs set the tone for whether or not students choose to engage in learning. The exact same students will choose to act drastically different when faced with high expectations in a structured environment. So because teaching is cultural and we've already been stamped with our own experiences, we have to examine our own mindsets and beliefs that come to the classrooms with us. At Success Prep, there were a ton of new teachers because not many veteran teachers choose to work in a building that was struggling so much. So we took on a lot of new teachers. And I often found that I had to ask them mindset questions, questions that forced them to examine the impact that their mindsets were having on students. So they were questions that sound like, what are you communicating to your students when you call on only 3 students every time? Or how did Terrell feel when everyone got a worksheet but him and you told him he had to share with someone? These kind of questions actually like caused many, many tears in my office because I was asking teachers to realize how their actions were saying something that they believed about students. If you want to change the culture of your school, the feedback has to start with adult mindsets and beliefs, and they can't be ignored. So the final lesson that I want to share today, and it feels just really relevant right now, is a lesson about curriculums. In the first 5 years, so year 1 to year 5 of teaching, so this spans Wicker and Success Prep, I taught a different curriculum each year. Some we got training in, some we didn't. Some we bought, some we made. Some were aligned to the Louisiana GLEs, then they were aligned to the Common Core. Some were spiraled and some were in units or modules. So at the end of year 5, I counted, I taught 4 math curriculums and 6 ELA curriculums. And here's what I learned. Curriculums can't respond to students. Like, only we can. But I did learn a ton from these curriculums. So I think because I had so many different ones so early on in my career, I started to really see like standards can take many, many different forms in instruction. And there are many different like philosophies behind how the curriculums were built. In every one of them, I found something I kept in my teacher toolbox and something I knew wasn't worth my valuable instructional time. So I kind of had this belief that curriculums should be used as learning tools for teachers and students. They do help align whole schools in terms of content and similar models and ways of talking about problems. They help new teachers envision what instruction can look like. But we have to use our curriculums in a flexible package that works for all learners. And in order to do that, we have to value our own expertise, what we know about our students, so we can be as responsive to their needs as possible. So I think that solving for equity looks like constantly striving to make our instructional practices as responsive to students as possible. And that's on us, it's not in our curriculums. So I want to end just by thinking about, I personally have been I've been thinking a lot about the start of my career in our current context, this is our 3rd school year being impacted by a global pandemic. And there are, I think, some really important lessons from the beginning of my career that feel so applicable right now. First, I think the biggest lesson I got from New Orleans from my time there is that chaos is a chance to question and reinvent systems that we use for students. Burnout in this pandemic is real right now, and that's partly because the choices that we had to make in response to a pandemic is really highlighting the flaws in our systems, like really highlighting them. So what better time to start to say, hey, why are we doing it this way? Is there a way of operating that's better for more students? Let's do that, right? And this is the time to do that. I think the other huge lesson, and I'm really, really passionate about this one, and I know it matters right now more than ever, we have to challenge the mindsets and beliefs of colleagues tempted to track students, especially this year. So students are not behind. I hear that all the time. Students aren't behind, but opportunity gaps have increased as a result of some of the choices we had to make in the last few years. Our colleagues who don't value difference in their classroom or don't have the content knowledge to span so much diversity, they're going to advocate for ways of sorting students that's going to increase opportunity gaps. And we have to challenge it. TJ says, we might have students who are low in particular concepts, but we don't have low students. All of our students are hardwired for growth. I have an 11-month-old in my life right now, and I believe that more now than anything. So I know that I have to challenge any colleague that shows any inkling of belief that a student is low and can't do something. Finally, I think that we just need to keep asking the question, how can I develop my practice so that it is more responsive to students? And I think for me, it's being an active member of the All Learners Network. It's coming to these learning opportunities together. It's having these conferences, going to these workshops that helps us get better and better in our practice and helps us really make all means all achievable. That's it for my story. Thanks for coming on a ride with me to NOLA. I really hope that you guys all enjoy your workshops. It really is that perfect opportunity to develop your practice so it's more and more responsive to students. And I just want to put in a plug that we are going to host another All Learners Network conference in New Hampshire in the spring. So be on the lookout for another opportunity to develop your practice.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for sharing that story with us. It was so inspiring, and Twitter has lots of quotes from Erin. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.